All right, so welcome to OKSL's Collection Development and Management Series. This specific session is on school library policies, and my name is Dr. Alicia Baker. I am the OKSL chair for this year, and I am very pleased to welcome Allison Hilburn to speak with you today. She is a library media specialist at Bristow High School, and she's going to talk to you about some of her experiences and speak to you with her expertise on school library policies. So just a quick disclaimer before we get started. The views and policies and actions expressed during this presentation are those of the speaker and do not imply the expression of opinion or of OLA or OKSL. The presentation is not intended to provide legal advice for you. So if you do have any legal questions, we recommend that you go talk to your administration, your school board. This is not to provide legal advice for you. So on that note, I would like to welcome Allison Hilburn.
Thank you. Little quick note about myself. I graduated from Bristow. This is my hometown. I have been a librarian for this is my fourth year. I had my degree for 9 years before I actually became the librarian. So that's kind of interesting that Laura used to say about having it for 6 years. It's just kind of us librarians, once you get into the role, you don't want to let it go. So but before that, I was an English teacher. I taught for 14 years English, so that kind of during teaching, I got my master's degree to be the librarian here at Bristow. And I really wanted the high school. We have 2 elementary schools and a middle school. And I would have try to get my foot in anywhere, but I really wanted the high school. So that's where I am now. I'm at the high school. It's where I taught English. I taught mainly sophomore English, and then went into the library position here. And like I said, I've been doing this. This is my 4th year. It's been an interesting 4 years. The very first year I was the librarian was 2019, 2020. And as we all know, about March of 2020 is when we had to stay home. And then for COVID, and then coming back, of course, was kind of strange. So it's been an interesting 4 years trying to develop this library. When I came into the library, we had our collection was pretty outdated. I was talking to some students today about our nonfiction section, about how it was like in 1996 was the average date of our nonfiction section. And I've gotten that to an average date of 2012. So I was super excited about that in 4 years. So we've done that. We've definitely revamped our fiction section as well. So it's really, I've been going through these selection policies and different reconsideration policies and how to select and what not to select and different things like that. I've been able to go through that over these past 4 years. So just going to go over a few things to consider. We're going to look at the responsibility of selection. Who is responsible for selecting the books, developing the collection? We're going to look at the method of selection, how we go about choosing what we choose and not choosing what we don't choose, and then the procedure for reconsideration of materials, because that's a must. And I have some personal experience with that recently that I'll talk about, that, again, within these past 4 years, very interesting 4 years. Never thought that some of the things that have happened would happen, but we're going to go through all that and talk about those policies. And these policies really I've looked over, like these are our policies, some of the things I'm going to talk about, but I have really looked at a whole bunch of different other towns, other libraries, other schools, and they're very consistent with ours. So one of the things, the first thing is the responsibility of the selection, and there's really like in our policy there's really a hierarchy. It talks about the Board of Education, that responsibility for the selection of library and media center materials being with the Board of Education, but then it's delegated to the library media specialist. The Board of Education, they are a group of community members that are volunteering to be a part of the board. And so, they delegate this responsibility to us because we are the ones that have the degrees. We are the ones that have gone through the classes that talk to us about selection processes and things like that. So it's delegated to us. Some things that we go by in selecting our materials. We look at our school library Bill of Rights. This is established by the American Library Association. And I had to explain this to my administration just, in the past year about this hierarchy, about this umbrella. We have the American Library Association, which is under the American Association of School Libraries, which is in part with the Oklahoma Library Association, which is then endorsed by the Oklahoma Department of Education. In some of the dealings that we've been going through this last year, people look at, Oklahoma specifically, and then they have to be shown that Oklahoma abides by the same things that a lot of other states do, American Library Association and American Association of School Libraries. And I have on my webpage, on my media webpage, I have the School Library Bill of Rights, that policy, and then all of these policies that I'm going to be talking about are board policies. We have them very plain on our media page so that people can see these and know these. We have on our website, we have our board policies, but sometimes it can get kind of lost. So we've pulled these policies specifically and put them on our library page for people to be able to access a little bit easier. And one of the main things that there's multiple things in the School Library Bill of Rights, but one of the main things that I wanted to highlight was, anyone involved in the decision-making process makes these decisions without personal, political, social, and religious views. So in looking at our policies, we include that our library media specialists, our principals, our superintendents, all of our administration, our classroom teachers, and the Board of Education, they are part of this. They are part of the decision-making process. So in abiding by the School Library Bill of Rights, we make these decisions without personal, political, social, and religious views. One of the things that we just recently, just like last week, like January 9th, we just revised one of our policies by adding the community standards bill. So Kyle Hilbert, who is actually from DePue, who is just a stone's throw away from Bristow, and who we were in discussion with when we were having issues with censorship and things like that recently. He wrote this bill to do with community standards. And a lot of people that when we had issues with people bringing up books and things like that, that they didn't agree with us having, they would quote the whole idea of community standards. And our whole position on that had been, before the bill was written, of course, was who creates these community standards? Do you? Does the principal, does the preachers of the community, do the, it just was like, who creates those community standards? Because I don't, I think differently than this person thinks, and this person thinks differently than I think of what's considered appropriate and different things like that. And so that whole idea of community standards really kind of irked us a little bit. However, the Board of Education is what we've come to say sets our community standards. I'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about like reconsideration, but we have gone through the reconsideration process, the whole entire process, going all the way to the Board of Education with 1, 2, 3 books. Like I said, within the last year or so. And when they made those decisions, like I said, it went all the way to the board. When they made those decisions, that set our community standards. If people want to see what their community really, you know, these people are supposed to be basically representing our community. However, they do need to understand, like this last bullet point, anyone involved in the decision-making process makes these decisions without personal, political, social, and religious views. So they kind of work hand in hand together. So that's who's responsible for the selection of materials. Like I said, it's a hierarchy, but ultimately, of course, it's delegated to the library media specialist. We're the ones with the degrees. We're the ones that have been taught selection process. Even though it might take some hands-on experience, basically. Just like if you're a teacher beforehand, you know that not everything that you were taught in your teaching in your education degree actually showed you what to do in the classroom. You kind of had to learn that hands-on. Okay, so then next thing we're going to talk about is method of selection. What do we use to select? And so there's several different things, of course, several different components, but I would really like, I'll talk about one probably in a little bit more depth, just because it's more tangible. It's more something that people can see. So during the method of selection, you look at selection emphasis, what you want to emphasize with your selection, and then the criteria for selecting those materials. So the selection emphasis I have on here, we look at curriculum support, extracurricular interest, and professional support. You get a drink of water. Curriculum support, you want to talk with your teachers. You want to know the standards, be familiar with the standards, and of course they change quite a bit, but really talk to your teachers about what they're teaching and how you can support that. We want it to, of course, encourage intellectual growth. We want it to develop cultural appreciation. But in talking to them, that's going to be a lot. I just had a meeting with a few of the department heads, and we really talked about some things that we could do, because collaboration is one of the things we're supposed to do as librarians. A lot of times, though, administration doesn't know that. Teachers don't know that. So you really have to kind of put yourself out there. And if you can get one teacher to talk to you about what they're teaching in class and how you can help, one teacher for the year, you score, you've done great, and then try to kind of increase that each year. Extracurricular interests, this for me is bigger than either one, just because I like fiction more than nonfiction. That's where I am. I love doing research. I love talking about research and helping people research, but of course, fiction is kind of my true love. So the whole extracurricular aspect of reading is what I look towards a lot more. And of course, this is just supposed to encourage independent growth and positive attitudes for independent reading. We want to provide background information that helps them make intelligent judgment in their daily lives. And so that's when you're looking at what a book is about, does it have those good role models? It can have bad people in it, but does it have people that are also showing them, good qualities? And then of course you can have student requests and teacher suggestions to guide you to meet this goal. However, there's other tools, of course, with this. Just recently, Colleen Hoover has been a big author that's been asked about a lot. And I very politely say that Colleen Hoover is not really appropriate for our library. And again, I'll show you guys, kind of how I would go about judging that. But I suggest to them books that I know that are a lot like Colleen Hoover, but maybe are more considered more young adult. And then the third one, professional support. It talks about providing a limited professional library, discipline handbooks, materials in library management. I will be very honest and frank with you. Like I said, I've been the librarian for 4 years. The very first year, the summer before my actual first year of being a librarian, we had 9,000 books in here, and I weeded a couple of thousand probably to start with. And a lot of that was like the professional support. I didn't weed it though to get rid of it out of the building. I moved it to the teacher's lounge, and I don't know if that's the correct thing to do. But that's kind of what I was like, hey, that's where they hang out. If they come in here, I want them really to like look at the fiction section so they can talk about these books with their kids. Or I want them to look at our nonfiction section and how they can include those books into their curriculum. The professional, we didn't have a ton of professional books, but I really kind of felt like if I instead incorporated those into where they might be hanging out more, like the teacher's lounge, then I thought it would get a little bit more of a look. Like I said, that was me. That's what I did. I don't know if that is for everybody, but that's what I decided to do. On the criteria for selection of instructional materials, you need a reviewing tool of some sort. So it needs to be professional. It needs to be unbiased. And what we have done recently in books coming up that people, thought were inappropriate for our library to have, was we showed them what tools we use. So we use Follett to buy our books. So on Tidal Wave has the school library journal. It has Kirkus. It has Book List. It has Publishers Weekly. It also has Horn, but Horn does not give an age and grade level or anything like that. Most recently, Follett has actually started putting those suggestions, the age and the grade, like front and center. When you look up a book, the shortness, like saying like it's for 9th through 12th, or it's for 14 plus or something like that, 14-year-old and plus, is right there at the beginning. Now, if you want to delve deeper into the review, you can go to the full text reviews. And really what we've done with that is we've been able to show that these professionals say that this is appropriate for 9th through 12th graders or through 14 plus. I actually took my whole fiction section and I made a spreadsheet. I ran a report, made a spreadsheet, and put School Library Journal, Kirkus, Book List, and Publishers Weekly in the columns. And I put all the reviews on there. I put what grade level it said, what age level it said. We serve 9th through 12th graders. So if there was one review that had 10 plus, meaning 10th grade plus, I've taken upon myself and actually have given it to some teachers to look over, why is it 10 plus? And that's, like I said, that it might be one 10 plus, but then the others are like 9 plus or 14 plus. So that's what we've been showing our community, is that we are using these professional tools. These are professional people that are giving these reviews. One of the things that people brought up to us was to do with, there's a few other websites that the community was using. Okay, sure, they can definitely use those. But I had to explain to them how they could be biased. If a review starts to give you how many cuss words it has, if it, if it's giving you excerpts, if it's giving you sentences out of context, that's a biased source, a biased tool. Again, they can use them in their home, but for us, we're going to stick with the professionals that aren't showing biased information. I've tried to explain that these words that, like it says it has this word in it, well, some families are fine with that word. So that's kind of where we've gone through with that. General criteria really follows a lot of what's in the school library Bill of Rights. It says materials will be selected that will meet varied needs, interests, and instructional and maturity levels of the students. So, maturity level, like I said, we have 9th through 12th. 9th graders are not as mature as 12th graders, but sometimes there's 12th graders that aren't as mature as some of the freshmen. So it can vary. Materials will be selected to represent all sides of issues, beliefs, and ideas. They can't be excluded because of race, nationality, religion, or political views of the author. They need to be sound, factual information, but they can't be removed or banned from the collection because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. And it also says evaluation will be made on the whole book rather than any part taken out of context. So that's the general criteria that we look at. And then specific criteria, like we have 10, let's see. Yeah, we have 10 different things in our policy, but most of them are very objective. We talk about the overall purpose of it, the reputation and significance of the author, the authoritativeness and accuracy of the material, the timeliness and currency. If you're having problems, one of the things when I first became the librarian, I told my principal at the time, I asked him, I said, do you trust me? And I said, because these books are old. So when you start to get rid of books, when you start to weed them, talk to your administration about the timeliness and currency of material. We hadn't had at the middle school, we had a part-time librarian. So she was at one of our elementary schools and she was at the middle schools 2 days and 2 days. We were a 4-day week at the time. And then before that, that had happened for several years. And before that, the librarian, she'd been a librarian for a long time. She just didn't like to get rid of things. That's not me. I am not a hoarder or, and I'd much rather everything look nice and new as much as possible, budget wise and everything. But I helped the new librarian. We have a new librarian for the middle school. This year, I said, I will help you go through this selection. And it was hilarious. Some of the books that we found, the biographies that we found, the books about technology with this old TV on the front of it and things like that. So, so timeliness and currency of material. Currency to me would be like how much it's checked out. That's another thing you want to look at when you decide whether or not to get rid of a book or not is, how many times it's been checked out. A few other things that talks about with specific criteria: relationship to other items in the collection, quality of writing and illustrations, fairness of ethnic and sex role representations. Books written several years ago might not be fair to ethnic and sex role representations. You need to look at that. Readability and popular appeal, format and price, of course. If you have the money, definitely hardback. And then the last one we have on here is favorable review and at least 2 reviewing tools. And that's where, like I said, comes into play with your professional tools. We try to have, for every book, 2 reviewing tools or 2 reviews, like one from School Library Journal, one from Kirkus. Our administration, when we were going through the reconsideration process that we were going through, they also, we got a subscription, digital and paper copy magazine of School Library Journal and Kirkus. So that is something that your administration can look into, is getting subscriptions to those tools, because like I said, we use Tidal Wave and Follett, but it's good to have those magazines, those professional articles as well. So that would be method of selection. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is reconsideration of materials. In your policies, it's imperative to have a reconsideration policy. Imperative. If you do not have it, that means anyone can come into your library and take a book off the shelf. Administration, teachers, parents, students. So it's imperative to have a reconsideration policy. One of the things that our reconsideration policy talks about is the parent's right. Of course, that has been a very political thing recently. And we fully give parents the right to not let their child, their own children, read a library book. We also, with our classroom assignments, this is in our policy, we talk about classroom assignments. If a book has been assigned to them and they choose for their student to not read it, then we come up with another assignment. And that's that's in conjunction with the National Council of Teachers of English, the NCTE. That's a procedure that's consistent with them. So, if you have a book that we assign that a parent doesn't want their child to read, then we come up with another assignment that, together with that parent. Our procedures, we have, I'm looking at the piece of paper here, and we have got like 13 different things, but this is really the meat of the procedures. The complainant fills out a form. We have a form. It says, it's got their name, their address, their telephone, the type of material. It's got the title and the author of the book. It says, after reading the entire book or listening to viewing the entire material resource, please answer the following questions. So they're supposed to state specific objections, cite page numbers, portions. They're supposed to state any merit noted in the material. So did you find anything good about the book? What do you believe might result from using the material? That's another question. What do you believe is the theme or purpose of this material? Have you reviewed the entire material? Because what we happened upon, like I said, and looking back, this would have been basically a year. This would have been last year. We had a group of community members bring us a document of 47 books. And actually the list wasn't that big at first, and then we continued to get these lists. And all it had on there was like excerpts. It had sentences. And of course those sentences had words in it, like, words that they thought were inappropriate. They had, instances and events and things like that they felt were inappropriate. And one of the things that I had to kind of explain is we don't look at excerpts. If we look at excerpts, it gets taken out of context. I gave the Bible as an example. If we take a verse out of the Bible, then we can have the same thing happen. So that was reviewing the entire material. And then what is the judgment evaluation of this material resource by professional critics? So they were supposed to fill out this form after having read the book in its entirety. And a lot of times before this year, when you say, okay, you can, you don't like what's in this book or whatever, then you have to read the book first. That's the first thing that you have to do. And a lot of times before this past year, that would basically stop people from going any further. That was not the case this past year. So they fill out the form first after having read the book in its entirety. If you look at my very last thing, I kind of put it here with an asterisk. At no time, and that's what to say will and not with, whoops. At no time will the book be removed from circulation. So that means they need to find the book themselves. Because if you check it out to them, it might not get back. But they really need to read it in its entirety. Then an informal meeting is supposed to occur with the principal. This was supposed to be the second step. So they talk to the principal about their findings and what they think. If they're not satisfied, then we have a review committee that's formed. The review committee, our committee, consists of the affected media specialist. So wherever, so if it's at the high school, it's me. If it's at the middle school, it's the middle school librarian, so forth and so on. It has affected grade level teacher. So again, that would be like if it's at the high school, then that could be a freshman teacher, a sophomore teacher, junior teacher, senior teacher. A community representative, so someone that represents the community, that's they've just volunteered to read the book. The media specialist from another building. So like I said, in my case, we have 3 other schools. So one of those, another grade level teacher, and then the principal is just a facilitator. We have them as a facilitator. So they're here during the meeting, after all the committee members have read the book. They're here facilitating the meeting and bringing it to a vote and things like that at the end of the meeting. So the review committee comes to a decision to either keep the book or not keep the book. If they're not satisfied with that committee's decision, that's when it goes to the board. This decision cannot be reversed for 5 years. So whatever decision the board makes, we have it to where the decision cannot be reversed for 5 years. And so that final decision rests with them. And that's kind of, like I said, that's where we came into, if people are wanting community standards, then that's their community standards right there. Your board represents your community. So their decision, if it's, they're given all the information. What happened when, because, and like I said, we had 3 books that went through the entire reconsideration process. And what happened at the board meeting was I got to speak about our findings, and the complainant got to speak as well. And then the board decided, they made a decision as to keep the book or not keep the book. One of the things that we have done over the last several years is revise these policies. I haven't been a part of all of those revisions because, like I said, I've only been the librarian for 4 years. But just recently we added the community standards thing. It's not necessarily written in our policy, but we did add an opt-out form after we had this last year of community members raising such a loud voice. We have this opt-out form where parents basically sign a form if they don't want their child to read mature content. And so let me explain mature content, how we do this. So I put a note in, like I said, we have Destiny. I put a note in Destiny. It says may contain mature content. And then I put in if it's language or sexual things or violence or drug use or something like that. And they make that decision for their child. So it's a note. When they come to check a book out, the book has that note under it. The child's name has a note under it saying that they can't check out mature content. And I base a lot of this, like I said, I base a lot of it on reviews and then simply reading as much as I absolutely can. But that's one of the things that we've kind of added recently is not only the community standards, but then this opt-out form for our students. For the elementary students and the middle school students, there's a form, they got a form as well, but we don't have what's considered mature content in our middle school or elementary schools. So that statement's not on there. It simply says that they're not, they can't check out books from the library or from our classroom libraries. So it's something that we've done recently. It doesn't make everybody happy, but like I said, it has calmed down a little bit. That is basically all that I have. So if anybody has any questions or anything, then I think I'm done.
Is there a way that we can see like your school policies? Like, can you send them to us, or is there a link to them?
If you go to, so our website for Bristow Public Schools, it's bristow.k12.ok.us. And then up at the top, it'll say schools, and there's a drop down menu, and you can click on Bristow High School. And then if you scroll a little ways down, there's on the left side, there's a button that says Media Center. That's my page. And on the left, it says, it says school, no, what does it say? Library board policies. And so then that link takes you to our board policy where it says school, library, and classroom media center policies. One of the main differences I've seen with ours, and again, this is us, we included our classroom libraries as well. We did that actually in 2018, I believe. That's something that we decided to do. Not everybody. That's one of the main differences I've seen between our policies and other people's policies.
Oh. I've never actually heard classroom policies be included in that. Could you tell us a little bit about the background, about like who maybe proposed that idea, and who was on a committee, or did you create a committee to help create those policies? And are they a lot different than the library policies, or are they just kind of included with the library policies?
So the classroom is included. It's included in here, like the title of our policy is school, library, and classroom media centers. And then within that, it talks about teachers. It says the responsibility for the selection of library and classroom media center materials. So, I mean, it's included in there. So I was not a part of, like I said, this was in 2018. That I think it was 2018, and I didn't come to become the librarian until 2019, but I was an English teacher at that time. And I remember that meeting of sitting down with the superintendent, and he talked about how for teachers' protection, about including this in our policy, that this is what we're using, that this is how we're using it. Then recently, within the last year, when this all came about, that was, of course, a concern of some of the community members, was not only our library, but was also our classroom libraries. So we've come up with procedures for that, in making sure that it follows our policies as well. I have a spreadsheet of all the classroom teachers. This is more difficult for the elementary librarians. It's not as difficult for me because we have 4 English teachers, and they're the ones that have the classroom libraries, and really nobody else does. But they made a spreadsheet. We used Libib to scan them all in, and those are on our website as well. If you go to our website on the left, it has classroom libraries. We have links to those so that the parents can see this is what's in the classroom, and this is what's been approved by the librarian based on our other selection procedures. Anything else?
I'm sorry, it's me again. I have another question for you. As far as you had mentioned, redoing some of your library policies, how do you determine when your policies need to be redone? And then do you create a committee to redo those when they're going to be redone, or do you just take it upon yourself to redo it?
So I'm looking at, like, right here, I'm looking at this policy, and it's been revised 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And basically 5, and then part of it's been revised 5 times, and then there's part of it that's been revised, it has on there twice. So we don't necessarily form a committee as far as I know. Like I said, I've been involved in the most recent change with the community standards, and then with what we've been going through the last year. And really, like, what basically some of the decisions, like a lot of the decisions that were made in this past year was myself and the other librarians and the superintendent and the assistant superintendent discussing what our policies look like. Were we adhering to these other associations and school library rights and things like that, and really just having a discussion. So I mean, we didn't necessarily, the committee was the librarians and then our superintendent and our assistant superintendent, and they will tell you that we had to teach them a lot about what our policies were, about what ALA and AISL and all that. I mean, we had to explain a lot to them about these different rights and the different policies that are in place. Now, like I said, then this community standard one was literally just put in there, the board, anything that's, when our policies are revised, really, I guess it's ultimately the board too. We talked about all these things, and then the board votes on it to be added to the policy. The community standards one, we weren't really necessarily talked to within the last few, since the bill had been passed. Basically, we saw the bill was passed and we knew that this would be added. But then we got an email basically that said, this has been added to the policies.
So let's say that we had someone here that is just going into a school library, and they either have really, really, really outdated policies, or they do not have policies in place. So they need to create policies. Do you have any suggestions about how they could go about getting started on that process?
Yeah, so I would definitely look at other schools' policies. So like Laura, definitely, our policy looks very similar to other schools. You can basically just Google, Laura, how big is your school?
We are about 1,200 pre-K through 12. I'm the district librarian, so I'm over all 3 areas. So I'm going to try to come up with a policy that's kind of an umbrella policy, and then have specific policies for each library also, if you think that would work.
No, yeah, that makes total sense. So yeah, these policies, this is an encompassing policy. And then what we kind of did, it's not necessarily like a board policy, but what we did last January was we had professional development, and all the librarians got up there and we gave a presentation as to, these are our policies, these are our selections, this is how we select things, and how that might look a little bit different for elementary school, middle school, and high school. So you want the policy, like the board policy, you want it to encompass everything. And then really just kind of looking at each school's individual like maturity level and things like that, and decide, the specific things that you want to do at those libraries. And that can be in writing, or that can just be, with, if you have other librarians or the librarian assistants or whatever. But what I would do is definitely look at other schools around your size, with your around, maybe even like your demographic and things like that. Google those, look up their board policies. You'll find that a lot of our board policies are very, very similar. And just it's fine to use a lot of the verbiage, because you'll notice it's very similar, and a lot of it comes from Library Bill of Rights, and like ALA's intellectual freedom, their statements. I used a ton of information from ALA and the intellectual freedom the last year. And then I would go to, after you've done your research and you've got, you kind of have an idea, definitely the next thing would be to involve the principal, the site principals, the superintendent, if you have an assistant superintendent, I don't know, involve administration, show them, hey, these schools have these policies. They have these policies because of this. This is why they have these policies, so that they can basically explain themselves. The library is a very mysterious thing to people for some reason. I know why. It's, like I watch TV and, you see the librarian with the bun and the glasses shushing people. That's what they think being a librarian is. So you really have to educate your administration. And then in turn be able to educate the rest of the community.
Any other questions for Allison? All right, so I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna take over if that's okay.
Yep.
And Allison gave some great information and some great ideas. There are some things that she talked about that are, perfect for our upcoming learning modules that we have in our series. So if you are wondering, like, what's it look like to go through those challenge process? She said she went through 3 of those. Are you guys seeing my my document?
Yes.
Okay, so she talked about going through 3 challenges in the past year, which is crazy. I'm sure that was a stressful time for you. If you want to hear more in depth about other challenges going on around this state, next learning module that we have is February 1st, and we're going to hear about 3 different systems that have gone through those. One is going to be a public library system that went through challenge, and then Durant High School, and then Bixby High School. So we'll be hearing from 3 librarians talking about their experience a little more in depth, so you can kind of see what their processes were like. So if that's something that you are maybe going through, or if you just want to prepare yourself in case that happens in your library, please join us February 1st. Also, she talked about selection tools in great detail. So thank you about talking about that and talking about using 2 different selection tools for the selection process. So on February 15th, we're going to have Latasha McKinney, and she's going to speak about selection tools on a tight budget. So we do, she talked about using Tidal Wave through Follett, and then some other, selection tools. Tidal Wave is free, but getting some other resources to use on a budget. So you could join us on February 15th to get some ideas there. And then she also talked a lot about weeding. So we're going to have Dr. Stacy Schrank, he's from Norman Public Schools, and Dr. Shelley Sharber, she's an associate professor from ECU. They're going to be talking about weeding your collection in more detail on March 29th. And then lastly, Allison talked in detail about working with your principals and superintendents. And we're going to talk with Lauren Sanders from from Mustang Public Schools. And we're going to talk about how you can effectively work with your administrator as a school librarian, how to make those connections, how to talk to them about what a school librarian does and what happens in the school library. So when you do come into a situation where you're dealing with a community member that has concerns or questions about what goes on in the library, your administrator is already going to know about what you do and how to handle those situations. So I hope that you all join us for one of those upcoming learning modules. Oh, that one's going to be April 5th. So there's going to be a lot of great information that goes hand in hand with what Allison talked with us about today. Just kind of go into more detail about each or some of those components she talked about. So this information will be sent out through the same avenues that you got this information from. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. I will send you the video for this, and also you will receive a certificate of completion from our continuing education committee. So you'll be getting that in an email. And if you have any questions about any of this, you can always reach out to me as your OKSL chair. You have my email on that. Please feel free to utilize our division. We have a lot of great school librarians that have a lot of expertise. Please reach out to us, ask questions if you need help. Laura, we know that you're, back into or into the library for the first time. You're not alone. So please utilize these wonderful resources that we have. And our best resources is our, our school librarians around the state. So it's great having you all. If you have any questions, you want to hang out, talk for a little bit, we do have a few more minutes, and you're welcome to hang around. So thank you so much for joining us.
And you can definitely email me. It's ahilburn@bristow.k12.ok.us. If you have any other questions or anything, I can email you back.